The universe was dark, cold, silent, and indifferent. Countless civilizations had risen and fallen in the face of a truth you could challenge. Power belonged to those who had been born with it, whether through vast technological empires or raw physical might. The strong devour the weak. That was the law of the galaxy, and humanity was among the weakest of all. Until they weren't. When humanity was discovered by the galaxy at large, they were seen as a backwater species from a planet bathed in moderate sunlight, orbiting a small yellow star. They had no advanced fleets or dreadnoughts, no mighty warriors capable of tearing apart enemies with their bare hands. To the galaxy's many warlords and emperors, humanity was an afterthought, a species too fragile for conquest, either suited for servitude or experimentation. But there was one thing the galaxy underestimated about humans, one thing they failed to understand: humans adapted, and when they did, they were blindingly brilliant. Starsith, commander of the Zorth Dominion. The great fleet of the Zorth Dominion floated silently through the void, its vast ships casting shadows on the lifeless moon below. Commander Skarsith stood on the bridge, his crimson eyes narrowed, as he studied the holographic display of the latest target, Earth. Pathetic, he muttered to his second-in-command, a burly alien with a voice like grinding stone. This world will fall in a matter of hours. Prepare the fleet for orbital bombardment. They don't even have planetary defenses capable of stopping us. The second-in-command replied. Should we bother with bombardment, or simply invade? Skarsith pondered for a moment, his taloned fingers tapping the control console. Invade. I want them alive to witness their own end. Let them know the Zorth Dominion took everything from them. With a nod, the command was sent. The Zorth fleet moved into position, weapons armed, preparing to rain down fire on the human cities. Skarsith had no doubt that humanity would crumble, just as every other species had before them. It was inevitable. 12 hours earlier. Dr. Sarah Nguyen stood in front of a large holoscreen, inside the command center of Earth's Defense Council. The situation was dire. Reports of the Zorth fleet had come in from the colonies, and Earth had less than a day before the invaders arrived. She wasn't a military strategist, nor a soldier. She was a physicist, a scientist who had spent years studying energy and light. But today, her expertise had become humanity's last hope. We're outgunned, outnumbered, and they'll rip through our defenses like tissue paper, General Hughes said. Case in the room. We don't stand a chance. Not with conventional means, Sarah interjected, but we have something they don't expect. The room fell silent, all eyes turned to her. You can't be suggesting we use that, a senior advisor whispered, his voice trembling. Sarah's eyes burned with determination. I am. We've run the simulations, it works. But the risks. We don't have a choice, she snapped. If we don't, we'll lose everything. General Hughes looked at her, then at the holoscreen showing the incoming fleet. His jaw clenched. Do it. Sarah didn't hesitate. She ran to the console and input the necessary commands, her fingers flying over the controls. The project was codenamed Brilliance, and it was unlike any weapon humanity had ever devised. It wasn't a bomb, or a missile, or a fleet of ships. It was light, pure, unrelenting light. Earth's greatest minds had discovered that light itself could be weaponized in ways far beyond mere lasers or energy beams. It could be amplified to such intensity that it overloaded the very senses of living creatures, drove their minds into madness, and even disabled advanced sensors and targeting systems. Prepare for activation, Sarah said into her comm. Zorth Dominion fleet. 10 hours later. The fleet descended on Earth, their weapons primed. Skarsith watched from the bridge, savoring the moment. He could see the human cities below, small and fragile, soon to be nothing more than rubble. But then, something strange happened. The sky, space itself began to glow. At first, it was a faint shimmer, barely noticeable, but within moments, it intensified. The stars dimmed. The void between them grew brighter and brighter, as if the universe itself was being set on fire. Commander, what is that? His second-in-command asked, panic rising in his voice. I don't know, Skarsith replied, his eyes wide with confusion. The light grew unbearable. The bridge's protective shields darkened to compensate, but it wasn't enough. The crew screamed, clawing at their faces, their eyes burning as the light seared into their brains. Scarseth fell to his knees, clutching his head in agony. Shut it off! Shut it off! He howled, but no one could respond. The ship's systems were failing, overloaded by the sheer intensity of the light. Weapon systems, targeting arrays, navigational gone. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the light vanished. The Zorth fleet, once an unstoppable force, now drifted aimlessly. Some ships had collided with each other in the confusion. Others had lost all power. But what haunted Scarseth most was the silence of his crew, whose minds had been shattered by the brilliance of the human weapon. 1 hour later, Sarah stood on the rooftop of the Defense Council building, staring up at the sky. The Zorth fleet was still there, but it was dead in space. Humanity had done the impossible. They had defeated the galactic power not with brute force, but with ingenuity, with the light of their own making. How did you know it would work? General Hughes asked as he stepped up beside her. Sarah smiled faintly. Because humans are creatures of light. We've always looked to the stars, not in fear, but with hope, and sometimes, all it takes is a little brilliance to turn the tide. Humanity had been underestimated, seen as nothing more than a dim light in the darkness of the galaxy, but when the moment came, they shone brighter than anyone could have imagined. They weren't just survivors, they were brilliant. The Zorth Dominion's fleet remained adrift, a graveyard of motionless ships caught in Earth's orbit, like leaves floating on a still pond. Earth's population watched in stunned silence as news of the victory spread. Across the globe, people gathered on rooftops and in the streets, staring up at the sky. For the first time in history, humanity had faced a threat from the stars and won. But the battle wasn't over. Scarseth, commander of the Zorth Dominion, the bridge of Scarseth's once mighty flagship, was a nightmare. The crew lay scattered across the floor, eyes wide open, faces twisted in expressions of madness or death. A few who remained alive babbled incoherently, their minds broken by the piercing light. Scarseth Saturday slumped in his command chair, his head throbbing from the after-effects of the weapon. His crimson eyes were dim, still recovering from the blinding intensity of the human weapon. He could barely move, his body weak, his mind dazed. How could this have happened? He rasped, voice hoarse. His second-in-command lay dead at his feet, his skull cracked from where he had smashed his head repeatedly against the wall, unable to bear the light's agonizing brilliance. Commander, a voice crackled over the comm system, faint but clear enough to draw his attention. This is Admiral Cracks of the Dominion's Third Fleet. We're en route to your location for rescue and reinforcements. What is your status? Scarseth struggled to respond, his pride warring with the overwhelming sense of defeat. He had been tasked with the simple mission of subjugating a weak, primitive species, and yet he had failed in the most spectacular way possible. Do not approach Earth, he growled into the comm. Their weapon, it is beyond anything we expected. Our fleet is destroyed. There was a pause on the other end. When the Admiral spoke again, his voice was laced with disbelief. Destroyed by the humans? Impossible. Impossible or not, it happened. Scarseth spat, his frustration boiling over. They used light, a weaponized form of energy that broke our minds. They disabled our systems. I don't care what you believe, but if you come closer, you'll suffer the same fate. Another pause, this time, longer. Understood, Craggs finally replied, his tone hardening. Hold your position. We'll assess the situation from a distance. Do not engage any further without orders. The comm went dead, leaving Scarseth alone in the silent tomb of his once proud vassal. He closed his eyes, trying to focus. He couldn't let this defeat define him. The humans might have won this round, but the Dominion was vast, and their resources far surpassed anything Earth could muster. This was only the beginning. Earth Defense Council headquarters, 1 week later. The world was still celebrating when the next wave of intelligence came through. Sarah Nguyen Saturday in the war room, surrounded by military officers and top scientists, her exhaustion barely masked by the excitement of their improbable victory. We have reports from the outer colonies, said General Hughes, pointing to a holographic map of the galaxy. The Zorth are regrouping. They're pulling their fleets back from nearby systems, likely preparing a counterattack. We've bought ourselves some time, but they'll be bad. Sarah nodded, rubbing her temples. We knew this wasn't a permanent solution. The Brilliance project worked, but they'll adapt, just like we did. It won't be caught off guard again. What about expanding the weapon? One of the defense analysts asked. Can we create more Brilliance arrays and protect our outer colonies? Maybe spread them across the system? Sarah shook her head. It's not that simple. The Brilliance array we used was a one-time deployment. The energy requirements were massive, had to reroute power from multiple fusion plants just to get it operational. We need time to build more, and that's time we don't have. The room fell into a heavy silence. They had won, but it felt like they were playing a desperate game, scrambling to find new ways to stay ahead of the Zor's inevitable retaliation. What about communication? Another officer asked. Could we negotiate a ceasefire, or at least try to make them think twice about attacking us again? Sarah looked at General Hughes, who shook his head. The Zorth don't negotiate with species they see as inferior. To them, we're an anomaly, something to be crushed and studied after the fact. If we don't prepare for another attack, they'll wipe us out. Sarah knew he was right. The Zorth wouldn't stop. They couldn't rely on diplomacy or deterrence. The only thing that kept them alive was the fact that it had caught the Zorth by surprise. And now, they needed another surprise. Brilliance isn't the only card we have, Sarah said after a long moment. We've been working on other projects, experiments that could help us fight back in different ways. What do you mean? General Hughes asked, his eyebrows raising. While Brilliance was focused on light as a weapon, Sarah explained, we've also been studying ways to manipulate other forms of energy, sound, gravity, even space-time itself. We're not just looking for bigger weapons, we're looking to change the rules of engagement. If we can't control the battlefield, even on a fundamental level, the Zorth won't know how to fight us. The room buzzed with murmurs, but General Hughes looked intrigued. You're talking about ordering the laws of physics. Not ordering, Sarah clarified. Leveraging. Humanity has always been about adapting, finding new ways to survive in environments that should kill us. We turned fire into a tool, electricity into a weapon, and now we're turning the universe itself into our ally. And how long before these projects are ready? The general asked, leaning forward. Sarah hesitated. Some of them are still theoretical, but we're making progress. If we can focus our resources, we might have something ready before the Zorth make their next move. Hughes stood up, addressing the room. Then that's our next objective. We don't wait for them to come back or prepare to face them on our own terms. We use whatever Sarah and her team can come up with, and when the time comes, we make sure the Zorth never forget the day they tried to take Earth. The officers and scientists nodded in agreement, the weight of their task settling over them like a heavy cloak. There was no time to rest. The victory had been sweet, but it was temporary. Humanity didn't have the luxury of complacency. When victory didn't guarantee survival against an enemy as vast and relentless as the Zorth dominion, Earth's leaders knew this, and in the weeks that followed the stunning success of Project Brilliance, a new race began, only not for domination, but for survival. The universe was watching. The Zorth weren't the only ones paying attention now. Other galactic powers had heard rumors of the defeat, whispers of humans using light to shatter the minds of their enemies. Some saw opportunity, others saw a threat, but no one remained indifferent. Zorth Dominion command ship, in deep space. Admiral Krax, a cold and calculating leader, stood in the center of the Zorth High Council's war room, surrounded by holographic images of Earth. A grim silence filled the chamber, broken only by the occasional flicker of static from the display. We underestimated them, Krax said, his voice even befuddled with steel. Their weapon was unlike anything we've encountered before. They turned light itself into a tool of destruction. The other Zorth leaders, their expressions twisted in disbelief and fury, murmured amongst themselves. The Zorth Dominion had conquered countless species, most of which had capitulated without much resistance. Humanity's defiance was a puzzle they couldn't yet solve. "Ow," one counselor finally asked, his pale skin glowing faintly in the dim light. "How did a primitive species on a backward world accomplish this? They have no fleet, no advanced technology, and yet they defeated one of our armadas." Cracks narrowed his eyes. "They used their minds. They didn't match us in brute force, but they outthought us. We must assume they will continue to do so." "And what do you propose?" another counselor snapped. "Send in another fleet, a larger one this time." Cracks shook his head. "No, we don't know the full extent of their capabilities. A direct assault will only lead to more casualties. We need to learn more about their weaknesses, observe them closely." "We need revenge," a voice growled from the corner of the room. Scarseth, still recovering from his humiliating defeat, stepped forward. His eyes burned with anger. "They humiliated us. My fleet, my warriority were destroyed by light and madness. I demand retribution." Cracks looked at him coldly. "Retribution will come, Scarseth, but we cannot afford to be reckless. If we strike again without understanding their new technologies, we risk another defeat." "I will not be remembered as the commander who lost to humans," Scarseth spat, his face twisting in rage. "Give me another chance. I will lead the charge. This time, I will not fail." The High Council exchanged glances, their expressions hard to read. Finally, the eldest among them, a shadowed figure with a voice like sandpaper, spoke. "Very well, Scarseth, you will have your chance, but this time, you will not go alone. We will send infiltrator agents who can gather intelligence on their weaknesses. If the humans are so clever, we will outwit them. We will break them from the inside." Cracks nodded. "Agreed. Let them believe they are safe. Let them believe they are the victors. And when the time is right, we will strike again." 3 months later. Sarah Nguyen stood on the observation deck of the UNS Horizon's Edge, Earth's first interstellar research ship, designed to push beyond the solar system and into uncharted space. The project had been accelerated after the battle with the Zorth, spurred by the realization that humanity couldn't afford to be confined to one planet any longer. They needed to explore, to expand, to find allies or at least understand the full scale of what was out there. The ship hummed with the soft energy of its engines, a sleek marvel of human engineering, blending science, exploration, and defense into one. It wasn't a battleship, but it could protect itself if needed. The Horizon's Edge represented more than just the future of space travel. It was a symbol of hope. It was humanity's first real step into the galaxy, no longer as prey, but as equals. "We're almost ready for departure," a voice said from behind her. Sarah turned to see Commander Marcus Hale, the ship's captain and an old friend from her days at the Defense Council. He gave her a small smile, though his eyes betrayed the tension he carried. Everyone knew the stakes. This wasn't just a scientific mission, it was a statement to the galaxy that humanity was moving forward. "How's the crew holding up?" Sarah asked, glancing out the viewport at the expanse of stars. "They're excited," Marcus said, stepping up beside her. "Most of them have been training for this their whole lives, but there's an edge of fear. They know the Zorth are still out there. Everyone does." Sarah nodded. "We've bought ourselves time, but we both know they'll come back. And when they do, we need to be ready." "Speaking of which," Marcus said, his tone becoming more serious, "how's Project Horizon coming along?" Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. Project Horizon was her newest initiative, born out of the lessons from Brilliance. It wasn't just about weaponizing energy, it was about understanding the very fabric of space-time, learning how to bend and manipulate it. If Brilliance had been a defense, Horizon was the next evolution, a way to control the battlefield on a fundamental level. "It's still in the early stages," Sarah admitted. "We've made breakthroughs, but it's going to take time. We're experimenting with gravity fields, quantum entanglement, even pocket dimensions. The idea is to create zones where the rules of reality don't apply, at least not in the way the Zorth expect." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Pocket dimensions? You're really pushing the limits of physics, aren't you?" She smiled. "That's the point. The Zorth have technology we can match conventionally, so we're changing the rules. We're not just building bigger guns, we're building a new reality where we're in control. Marcus nodded, looking out at the stars. Let's hope we get the time we need. In orbit above Earth, far above the planet, a small Zorth reconnaissance ship drifted silently, its cloaking systems masking it from human sensors. Inside, 3 Zorth operatives worked in unison, tapping into Earth's communication networks, studying ship movements, and listening to military transmissions. We have what we need, one of them said, his voice a low hiss. Their research, their defenses is all here.